It may not have been great for the Kraken in the race for the first overall pick, but that's tomorrow's problem. As for today, we're having fun because the Kraken got their 20th win of the season and their second one in a row. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where once again the Seattle Kraken get their second win in a row, defeating the Arizona Coyotes in Arizona 4-2. And in some ways, this third and final meeting between these two teams was a pretty important game in that these are two of the three teams with the best odds at that first overall pick and Shane Wright in this year's entry draft. Of course, with this being the type of race where winning is actually a bad thing against the teams that you're competing with, it doesn't necessarily help the Kraken that they beat the Coyotes to go above them in the standings. Still though, as a fan, it's just fun to watch your team win games. And for the Kraken, this would also be the first game they would be playing after the dust settled around the trade deadline, where they lost almost half of the roster, or at least what seemed like it. I mean, to be honest, it really wasn't that far off, as they lose 6 guys from the locker room when they go down to Arizona to play this game against the Coyotes. After all of that and all those guys the Kraken lost from the starting lineup, it may come as a surprise that they didn't actually have to go out on the streets of Glendale to find enough people to put on the ice to play this game for them. In fact, actually when it comes to the starting lineup, they really don't have very many new faces at all. On the defensive end, although they do lose Giordano and Lauzon, a complete culling of anybody wearing the number 5, they do still have enough guys that have played this season from that carousel in the third pairing that there are no new faces playing for the Kraken in this game, with both Hayden Fleury and Borgen playing in this one. Yes, Fleury does play at least most of this game, in spite of what most people were joking about, where Fleury would still find a way to get scratched. Meanwhile, on the forward end, there also aren't that many new faces. Cole Lind does come back from the AHL after a pretty short stint there since the last time he played for Seattle, and it sounds like he'll be playing the rest of the season with the big club. Also, the Kraken end up getting Carson Kuhlman, though I guess they got him back for the last game, but they get Kuhlman and Jonas Donskoy back from injury recently that also fill in a couple more of those missing spots. Really, the only new face for the Kraken that does play in this game is the new guy in Daniel Sprong that the Kraken got in the trade with Johansson from DC. And as we'll see, it didn't take him very long at all to make an immediate impact. As the game gets started with the Kraken looking for their first ever victory against the Coyotes in 3 attempts, having lost the previous 2, including the first one in this building, it does have a pretty lackluster start, even though in the last time the Kraken were in Arizona, there were 3 goals in the first minute and a half and 2 goals in the first minute for Seattle, taking a 2-0 lead really early on in that game. Now, in this game, there are a few shots, the difference being that they don't all go into the net immediately like in that first meeting. And even though there do continue to be a fair number of shots on goal from both teams through the first 12 to 13 minutes of this game, outside of one push that the Kraken have kind of 6 to 7 minutes in, it's a pretty harmless start to this game, as most of the shots are pretty easy for the goaltenders to stop. Eventually, Borgen does draw a holding call, which sends Seattle to the first power play of the game. And honestly, it's a pretty decent power play, at least by Kraken standards anyway, with them getting a number of shots off on goal, including one pretty good look from McCann that Vejmelka is able to stop short side, and then late in the power play, a couple of absolute bombs fired off by the new guy in Sprong, who was getting some chances on the second power play unit. Still though, by the end of it, this power play has a result that Kraken fans are all too familiar with no pucks getting into the back of the net. I mean, I guess the bright side is that there's also no pucks in the back of the Kraken net, but still. On the bright side though, the Kraken are able to use this power play to really build some momentum and finally get some extended offensive zone time with a number of shots on goal and getting everything as far as momentum is concerned going in their favor over the next few minutes. Again, nothing ends up in the back of the net, and eventually Arizona is able to turn that around in their favor over the last couple of minutes of the first. Eventually, even drawing a penalty of their own. The late Arizona power play comes off of a tripping call against Vince Dunn, which he didn't like the call, but I gotta be honest, it was a pretty obvious trip, and it's immediately followed up by not 1, but 2 very good scoring chances from the slot from Phil Kessel, as he drives towards the net, splitting the Seattle defense right down the middle of the slot, getting one very good shot off, and then isn't quite able to cleanly handle the rebound to get a second good shot off, but is still able to try to chip it at Grubauer. Still, Grubauer is able to keep it out of the back of the net, and Arizona goes to the power play to finish out the first period, and also some of it ends up bleeding into the second. The Kraken are able to kill off the entirety of this penalty successfully, both the part of it that's in the first period and the rest of it that happens in the second. Though, there still is one pretty sad moment in it early on, back in the first period, when Yanni Gourde breaks the puck out of the Kraken end of the ice, carries it through the neutral zone, and is trying to create a breakaway going the other way shorthanded. But as soon as he looks up, he realizes that Blackwell is nowhere in sight. In fact, he's no longer on the team. Gourde immediately turns around, goes back the other way, dumping it to Fleury, who eventually clears it back to the other end of the ice. And yeah, it has to be said that especially with Gourde coming into this game, still with a very clearly black eye and a scar under that eye, he kind of looked like a guy who had gotten mugged and had his 2 line mates taken away from him. I know, too soon, but it had to be said. And to Colin Blackwell, if for some reason you are watching this, just know that all of us Kraken fans, and Yanni Gourde in particular, definitely already miss you, and Appleton as well. Also, say hi to Gio for us. Back to the game though, as the Kraken do once again successfully kill off this first Arizona power play to start out the second period. It doesn't take them long to regain momentum of the game, once again pressing to get that first goal and break the ice in this one, as there wasn't any scoring in the first period at all. However, at 6.5 minutes, that all comes to an end when Hayden Fleury gets a little too overly aggressive on Clayton Keller against the boards behind the Kraken net, which leads to a cross-checking call and another Arizona power play. And for a second time in this game, the Kraken penalty kill is doing a pretty good job of killing this Arizona power play off. Granted, the Coyotes power play is somehow even worse than Seattle's, but still, it's a struggling Seattle penalty kill unit that is doing its job now for a second time. Right up until about 15 seconds left in the Coyotes power play, it's Keller who took the penalty, driving towards the Kraken net around the faceoff dot. He looks right at Grubauer and then shovels a no-look backhand pass into the slot where Schmaltz is waiting for it, and he fires off a shot that catches Grubauer off guard, and it goes right into the back of the net to give the Coyotes the 1-0 lead. At least after the Kraken gave up that power play goal to the worst power play team in the NHL, they do get the puck into the offensive zone right off the ensuing faceoff, and then force another faceoff in the Coyotes' end of the ice, which they also end up winning, getting it out to Carson Soucy by the blue line, who walks along it and then fires off a shot right down the middle of the ice from the middle of the blue line, and it's into the back of the net! And the Kraken have tied it just 30 seconds later. Actually, it doesn't even end up taking 30 seconds, it only takes 18 seconds for the Kraken to tie this game at 1 off the stick of Carson Soucy, who uses a very good screen by Alex Wennberg in front of the net, where Vejmelka never even sees the shot coming. For Soucy hits his 8th of the season, and both Wennberg and Eberle get their 21st assists on the goal. And it has to be said, it was very obvious on the broadcast that when this goal went in from Soucy, the crowd absolutely erupted. I mean, there had to be at least half of the fans in that building that were there to see the Kraken play. Which, I mean, the Seahawks have always traveled well to Arizona, and the Mariners are playing in Peoria right now in spring training, so I guess it makes sense that there's a lot of Seattleites down there. But still, it was fun to hear that almost home-like crowd cheering on the Kraken in this game in Arizona. And I'm not just making that up, I actually did see it on Twitter from some people who were actually at the game that were legitimately estimating that somewhere between 40 to 50% of that crowd was there to cheer on the Kraken, which, considering the massive attendance of 11.6 thousand, that's a good number of Kraken fans down there in Arizona. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Wait, 11.6 thousand? That's not a very big crowd at all. What the heck are you talking about? Well, by NHL standards, you'd be absolutely right. 11.6 thousand is not a very big crowd at all. However, when you consider the fact that that is over twice as many, even maybe 3 to 4 times as many fans as Arizona is going to be able to get in the Arizona State Arena over the next few years, I mean, that's a pretty decent sized crowd, and that 40 to 50% of it, which would be somewhere between 5,000 to 6,000 Kraken fans. So if all of you show up next year and the year after that, maybe you could fill that entire building with Seattle fans. And right after the next faceoff, the Kraken are once again back into the offensive zone, trying to score for a second time. As Lind comes around the outside, he passes it up to Fleury for a one-timer, but Fleury flubs it. It goes right to Eriksson, who passes it up to Ritchie, who gets on a breakaway and ends up beating Grubauer to give Arizona the quick response goal, and just like that, it's 2-1. It takes the Coyotes just under 45 seconds to respond to the Soucy quick response goal, and just like that, where this game had been 0-0 8 minutes in, just past 9 minutes in, it's now 2-1 Yotes. Okay, so I guess we were just saving that whole scoring a whole bunch of goals on back-to-back shots thing for halfway through the second period rather than right at the start of the game. I don't really know why. It was kind of more exciting when it happened at the start of the game last time, but I guess here we are anyway. And it wouldn't take long after this flurry of goals from both sides, the last one coming off of a Fleury mistake, and actually the first one coming from a Fleury penalty. So yeah, pretty rough period for Hayden Fleury, which actually got even worse later, where at some point he ends up taking an injury and wouldn't end up returning to the bench for the Kraken to start the third period or at any point in the third. So hopefully he's okay going forward. Still though, this was a rough stretch for him. Regardless, just a couple minutes after all of that, it's the new guy in Daniel Sprong who ends up drawing a call. It's an interference penalty against the Coyotes, and Seattle's gonna get their second power play of the game. And this second Kraken power play does spend the entire first minute and a half straight in the offensive zone. But even at that, it's kind of a lackluster power play that really just seems to lack motivation and inspiration in any way, as the Kraken just kind of slowly pass it around the outside, not really getting any dangerous chances. And eventually it's not even Arizona who clears the puck, it's Seattle missing a pass up to the blue line and effectively clearing it themselves all the way back to the other end of the ice. So after having done pretty much nothing on the power play of any real value, with 15 seconds left in the power play, Vince Dunn passes it up to Jaden Schwartz, who gets it through the neutral zone and passes it off the boards to Sprong, who once again is in the second power play unit. And with just 9 seconds left in the power play, Sprong drives towards the net and then just fires off a shot, and it's into the back of the net! And just like that, the Kraken have a power play goal. So there you go. I guess you really don't need all those fancy passing plays and real power play structure, which the Kraken don't seem to have. All you really need is a guy with a really strong shot to wait for a defenseman to screen his own goaltender and then catch him off guard, getting it into the top corner of the net to tie the game at 2. And for Sprong, just a day after being acquired by the Kraken, obviously playing in his first game for Seattle, showing off that rocket of a wrist shot that he has, not only scores a goal in his first game, but a power play goal with a power play unit that has been struggling this season, as we're all very well aware. And just a couple minutes after scoring this goal on the power play that he drew the penalty for, Sprong once again draws another penalty. This time it's a hooking call to send the Kraken to another power play. And this power play does go, I'd say, a little bit better than the one before it, but it doesn't end up getting the result that you would want in scoring a goal. So with Arizona able to kill off this Kraken power play, in the end, of the 3 Kraken power plays, it's the one that kind of looked the worst of the 3 that somehow finds a way to score. Go figure. Though with that having been said, the Coyotes are really only able to kill off this third Kraken power play by technicality alone, as with the power play coming to an end, Geeky's able to get a puck off of the boards, pass it backwards out to Donato, who drives towards the net looking for a shot, and just as it looks like he's ready to take that shot, he has the puck taken off of his stick by Arizona. However, he's still able to recover long enough to get the puck back and fire a pass out and up to the other side to a wide open Soucy. And just as the 5th player is entering the play for Arizona out of the box, Soucy fires off a shot and scores, deflecting off the top of the pad of Vinimelka and into the back of the net to give the Kraken the 3-2 lead. Technically, it's a 5-on-5 goal, but it comes just seconds after the power play ends. And for Soucy, it's his 9th goal in the season and 2nd goal in this game. Not only that, but his 2nd goal in this second period alone, becoming, according to Kraken Stats on Twitter, the first defenseman in the NHL this season to have 2 multi-goal periods on the year. And how does he celebrate that 2nd goal of the game? Well, he celebrates it 2 minutes later by going to the penalty box, giving Arizona their 3rd power play of the game, and for a 2nd time in this game, a power play that will span the intermission. As we get deeper into the 3rd period, again, after the Kraken are able to successfully kill off that penalty to start the 3rd period, the next almost half of the 3rd period is rather uneventful, which for the Kraken is perfectly fine considering they hold a lead. Until eventually, about 9 minutes in, Arizona is finally able to create a pretty good scoring chance. It all starts from a tight angle shot that rebounds off of Grubauer out into the slot, and Kraus is able to get a very good look on the Kraken net from the slot. Wide open, he takes the shot, but fans on it almost entirely as it just kind of dribbles next to the net. However, it almost ends up working out for the Coyotes as the fan-on shot by Kraus turns into a pass to Eriksson waiting next to the net. Meanwhile, Grubauer's caught completely off guard, expecting that shot up by the top of the crease where he was taking the angle away. Instead, now there's an empty net behind him for Eriksson to shoot at. Somehow, though, the puck ends up going through the crease and wide of the net harmlessly, keeping the Kraken in the lead of this game. And it turns out that Grubauer was able to just barely reach back in time with his stick, getting the heel of his stick on the shot from Eriksson and keeping this one out of the net, deflecting it wide. On the replay, it is kind of hard to tell if Eriksson's shot was going to end up on the net anyway, but considering the effort that Grubauer went to get his stick in front of the Eriksson shot and the fact that he was able to get the heel of his stick on it in the first place, we'll just say that this was a spectacular save from Grubauer that keeps this game from being tied. Still though, Arizona is able to build some momentum through the middle part of the third. Grubauer though isn't having any of it and keeping everything that Arizona offers at him out of the net. And eventually Seattle is able to use that to turn the momentum back in their favor. And finally, with about 7.5 minutes left in the game, Lind behind the net in Arizona's end is able to shovel a pass off of the boards out to McCann, who opts not to go for the shot, but instead passing it back across to the other side, where Geekie is waiting all alone to take a relatively lazy shot at a basically empty net, and he doesn't miss, putting it into the net to give the Kraken the 4-2 lead. It's a beautiful tic-tac-toe play from this new Lind Geekie McCann line that leads to the Geekie goal, where Geekie knew this puck was going into the net before it even gets to him. And for Lind, who starts this play in the first place, and I also have to say played a fantastic game once again for the Kraken, he also gets the secondary assist on the Geekie goal, his third assist of the season for the Kraken in 8 games, and also the 3rd point in his NHL career. Still looking for that ever-elusive first NHL goal. But with the way he's been playing for the Kraken, especially over these last few games he's played for them in the last couple of months, I wouldn't be terribly surprised if he does get that first goal here in the last month of the season, where it sounds like he's going to be playing most of the rest of the games. In fact, I'd almost be surprised if he didn't get that first goal at some point here. And after this 4th goal goes in for the Kraken off the stick of Geekie, the rest of the game is rather uneventful, much like the start of the 3rd period, even after Arizona pulls the goaltender to try to even things up late, or at least get close. Seattle doesn't end up finding the back of the net, although Susie does try to make it happen for the hat trick, and this game does end 4-2 with Seattle winning it for the first time against the Coyotes. As far as takeaways from the game are concerned, I'd have to say the biggest one, and the one that stands out the most, was the play of the forward lines, which surprisingly was very good almost all game long, especially considering the amount of mixing and matching that had to go on to make these new lines after all those guys left via the trade deadline. Especially the Gord line, which, missing Blackwell and Appleton, still played pretty well, with Gord leading on the strong forecheck alongside Donato and Kuhlman. Kuhlman in particular, I think, is a good complement to Gord with the speed to keep up with him down the ice. It'll just take a little bit more time for them to develop that chemistry, so we'll see some of those plays that Gord and Blackwell were able to pull off. Surprisingly, probably the best line in this game, at least in my opinion, was that Lind Geekie McCann line that scored the final goal. They really were controlling the puck most of the time they were out on the ice, and had a number of scoring chances, even though only one of them ends up in the back of the net. Also, the 4th line of Cheyenne, Sprong, and Donskoy had some good moments as well. It took them a little while to get going, and they were pretty invisible in the first period, which makes some sense considering Sprong is just now on the Kraken after having been acquired the day before. But still, in the second and a little bit in the 3rd period, they were able to create some pretty good scoring chances, even if they weren't quite the tic-tac-toe passing chances that we saw from the McCann line. Also surprisingly, though maybe not quite as much in a good way, the one of the 4 lines that didn't really stand that much out was that first line of Wennberg, Schwartz, and Eberle, just not really seeming like they could get much of anything going like the other 3 lines were at points in the game, and as a line, ending the game with just 4 shots on goal between them. Meanwhile, the individual shot leaders for the Kraken in this game were led by, on the forward end, Daniel Sprong with 5 shots, and on the defensive end, Carson Soucy with 8. The Kraken in total, after matching a season high with 52 shots on goal in their last game against the Red Wings, exit this game with 39. Of course, some of the success of those forward lines and that offensive output that the Kraken were able to get with newly formed lines could be due to the fact that they were playing the Coyotes. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see if these lines stay together, and if so, what they can do playing against a likely to be playoff team in the next couple of days against the LA Kings. Until then, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this game and the now 2-game winning streak for the Kraken down in the comment section below. And as always, if you've made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that help support the channel. And until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, and go Kraken.